Incidentally, we go way back. We did our masters together back in the Delhi School of Economics in between the years of 2004 and 6. That gives you an indication of how old we are too. Yeah. Saurabh works at the intersection of development, its political economy, and behavioral economics. He has a lot of work in the field of education and human capital formation, early childhood development, and yeah, we are very much looking forward to learning more about the long-term effects of improving early life learning preparedness on cognitive abilities. I believe this is evidence from Indonesia.
Yes.
And this is joint work with Arya, who's based at the University of Kansas. So Saurabh, you have 1 hour, and yeah, we will ask you questions along the way.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. It's very nice to be here for the seminar, and I'll jump straight into it, and then please stop me at any point in time. All right. So dementia is an increasing issue in all parts of the world, but more especially in low and middle income countries. So it's estimated that majority of those with dementia live in lower income countries. So, but not only that, the rate at increase with which this population is increasing is also a cause of concern, because the number of people living with dementia in low-income countries is expected to increase over time as well. So if that's such a big issue, why should we care about it? Well, dementia has a lot of social and economic consequences. It's been shown that it's negatively linked with labor productivity, negatively linked with financial decisions, and there's obviously direct health, direct effects on those living with dementia, but also indirect negative effects on your friends and families as well. So with all that in mind, we want to think about how we can get people to age healthily over time, so that we can control the social and economic effects of living with dementia, both at the level of the individual, but also at the more macro levels in terms of the amount of healthcare expenditures. So in that context, we want to examine what's the role of early life conditions in determining our long-term cognitive abilities, and how policies can help. All right, so we're going to focus on one such.
Just for my own sake, just to clarify, when we think about, so is the principal like what is the principal way that dementia manifests itself? Is this kind of loss of cognitive abilities?
That's the first sign. That's the first sign, right? So that's highly correlated, a sharp decline. All right, so we're going to focus on age for grade, the age at which you are in every grade of your schooling life. And I'm going to think about how an increase in the age for grade could help with long-term cognitive ability. So the idea here is that if you go to school slightly later, you're a bit more mature when you're in school. You're better prepared for the formal schooling system. You absorb the curriculum a lot better. There's an improvement in your cognitive abilities. You stay in school longer. You end up with jobs that require you to use your cognitive abilities in your daily professional life. And hence, in the long run, you could end up with a greater stock of cognitive abilities and a lower risk of getting mental diseases such as dementia. This has been examined in the past, but the key challenge of getting causal evidence on this is the fact that age for grade can be endogenous. Parents can choose to send their kids to school a bit early or a bit later. You may be repeating grades due to some unobserved abilities. All of that creates difficulties in pinpointing the causal effects of age for grade. The usual way that the economics and the education literature has gone about this is using the cutoff dates during which you can enroll in school. Usually in many countries, it's September, and looking at those kids who are just able to go to school versus those who have to wait a full 12 months to go to school. The issue with this, which papers have not been able to solve, is that any effects that you identify is a combination of absolute and relative age effects. So those kids who are waiting a whole 12 months to go to school are absolutely older because they've waited a full 12 months relative to those who just were eligible to go to school. But at the same time, they're relatively older to the other peers in their age cohort because they go to school with the next year's age cohort, and they will be the oldest kids in that age cohort. So you're both absolutely older and relatively older, and a combination of these could be leading to any events. We are able to get around that. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the impact of an unexpected shift in the academic year in Indonesia, and I'll explain how that helps me. Okay, so let me tell you a bit more about the academic calendar shift. So up to 1978, the academic calendar in Indonesia ran from January to December. So you started school in January and finished off in December. In 1978, there was a new Minister of Education who, in the middle of the year, declared that the academic year is going to shift to July. And this was implemented in the next year in 1979. So in 1979, instead of the academic year starting in January, it would start in July. The reason for this was to make the schooling year coincide with the budgetary cycle. But what this implied was that everyone who was in school already by 1978 would end up having a 18-month academic year rather than a 12-month academic year. So because this policy was introduced so late, there was no new material to be taught. So in those additional 6 months, basically teachers were told to repeat what they had already taught. Kids had to continue playing sports and arts and craft activities. They had to pay the school fee. So everything was normal. There was just no more new material to be taught. And the exams took place in June rather than in December. All right. So think of this as a compulsory grade repetition for everyone. Yes.
So that meant that the exams that took place in June, the students that sat for it would have had extra months of preparation.
6 months. 6 months. 6 months. So you getting the same material repeated over an additional.
Right. But they had those additional 6
months. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
And just to understand, so you're concerned about that, suppose new material was introduced, and you're concerned about the fact because what kind of confounding effect, and that there is just more.
So learning new things which could have helped with your
Development of cognitive ability.
So here there is no new material that was
okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can get into talk about it later, but I mean, it depends upon how we think about how important are things like arts and crafts and sports and civics and all for like mental development.
I would say that as long as you were in school,
yeah.
Let's say that you were not held back in the same grade for 6 months. You went from grade 1 to grade 2. In grade 2 as well, you would be doing sports and arts and crafts as a part of your daily school activities. So that's not anything new. As long as you were in school, you would have some structure whereby you would have some time to play, some time to do arts and crafts. So that's not anything additional that you would do. In addition to this, there was nothing else uniquely that happened at exactly this point in time, and we have a lot more analysis to convince you that there's nothing else that is going on at exactly the same time. Okay, so it's probably pretty evident what empirical strategy we're going to do. So we're going to look at this discontinuity around 1978, 1979. We're going to use the fact that you had to be at least 6 years old to be able to enroll in grade 1 legally at the time of the policy change. So those who were in school by 1978 must have been born before January of 1972. Those who were born January 1972 onwards were the ones who were waiting to enroll in school and now had to enroll in school of July 1979. So we're going to use a fuzzy RD design using your date of birth as an instrument. All right, so the second stage regression, why are the outcomes that we are interested in? E is an indicator if you were already enrolled in school at the time of the policy change in 1978. D is the distance from the cutoff date of 1972 in months, and we allow for a flexible RD relationship where the relationship is allowed to differ on either side of the cutoff. So enrollment is endogenous, and we're going to instrument it with a dummy indicator if you were born before or after Jan 1970.
And what's going to be the window that you want to look around?
So you're just going to keep 6 years plus minus 1972 because primary school is 6 years and there was a high dropout rate between primary school and secondary school in the 1970s. So for the main analysis, we keep it as 6 years. For robustness checks, we reduce it down to, I think, 3 years, and you can expand it up to 9 years as well. Results are stable. All right, a lot of X variables as well. So we've got gender, age, your ethnicity, if you were born in a village, parental education, if you went to kindergarten, and your health indicators during childhood, district of birth, fixed effects, and month of birth, fixed effects to control for the fact that if you were born just after harvest, maybe your parents had a lot more money available during early childhood cycle. All right, so we're going to use the Indonesian Family Life Survey. So I guess most of you might have already seen these data. So it's a longitudinal data set with 5 waves going from 1973 to 2014. Wave 1 was representative for 83% of the population, and there's very low attrition throughout this time period. So we're only going to use the 5th wave, the 1914 wave, where on average the individuals will be 42 years. Okay. So the deeper purple areas are the ones that are covered by the FLS, and the light pink ones are the ones that are. All right, so the cognitive outcome measures. So we have 3 categories. The first one is memory, and we have 2 types of measures of memory. First one is what is called episodic memory, and this is measured in 2 ways. The respondents are told a list of 10 words by the enumerator, and then the enumerator asks them to recall as many words as they can immediately after that. So that's immediate word recall. Then the enumerator asks you a few questions, and about 5 minutes after that, the enumerator says, can you remember any of the 10 words that I had mentioned some time back? And then again, you list as many as you can remember. So that's delayed word recall. So the score on this runs from 0 to 20. So we're just going to aggregate it. Then the two measures of mental intactness, which is day and date recall. Do you know the day of the week? Do you know the date? So that's a measure of 0, 1 measures. And then the last one is called serial sevens, whereby the in which the respondent is asked to subtract 7 from 100 5 times sequentially. Each subtraction is graded independently. So if you make a mistake, but the next time you don't make a mistake, that's fine, right? So 100, 93, 86, 79, so on and so forth. So that goes on a score of 0 to 1. There's evidence that all of this peaks at the age of 30 and then starts to decline.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I guess probably holds true for all of us or most of us here. We are
These are all youngies, man, you know.
All right. Okay. Okay. Well, not for.
They're all pieces. They are very strong.
Well, for us.
Yeah, we are over the hill.
Well, for us, we are on the downward slope. Then the two measures of fluid intelligence, which is Raven's matrices, where you're shown this pattern, then you have to guess the missing figure. Maybe a bit more complicated ones as well. So these are nice because you don't need any language skills to test this. Then there's also a numerical series test, which has the same logical reasoning to it. This is adaptive. So in a sense, you're given 3 questions like this. You're asked to guess the missing numbers. If you do well, then the next test that you get is slightly harder. If you don't do that well, then you get a easier set of numbers the next time. So this is so it adapts to your ability. All of these are standardized, and the last one is numeracy. There were 5 basic math problems. So all of these have been shown to be highly correlated with the onset of dementia in late adulthood, and they're all essentially declining once you pass the age of 30.
At some level, if you could look more into the data, people were a bit more older, you would be likely to find much stronger effects in some sense, because like now you said, average age is 42. So
those who were born in 72, yes, they're about 42.
Yeah, that there might be kind of like, but still, like as they get like, I don't know if the rate of decline maybe.
So we have some results on that.
Okay.
Just some statistics on how well they're able to do. So as such, for word recall, people are able to remember 9 words out of a max of 20. Date and day, most people are able to recall. Serial sevens, about 7 out of 5. So about half the sample is female. The average age is about 42 years old. Okay, and most of those in the sample are born in a village, which you would expect in the 1970s in Indonesia. All right, so let's get into the results. So first, to show you that our assumption on enrollment in school holds. So this is the first stage. So the red line here is January of 1972. The to the right here, to the right of the red line are those who were born after January of 1972. So these were people who were too young to be in school in 1978, and most of them were not in school, right? So these dots here are quarterly bins. So the first 4 dots are those people who were born in 1972. So some of these kids should not have been in school, but a few of them were in school. 1973 onwards, essentially nobody was in school and they shouldn't have been in school. On the left side is those who were born December of 71 and before, and you'll see that about 80% of the children here were in school. This obviously should be 100, but some of the kids were not in school. Okay, so there's a sharp change in the probability that you were enrolled in school at the time of the policy change. So in a sense, it's showing that the first stage. Next, we show you the main results. So these are the 3 cognitive measures that we have on memory, fluid intelligence, and numeracy. Again, going from right to the left. On the right-hand side are those who are the youngest in the sample. Left-hand side are those who are the oldest in the sample. As you would expect, as you get older, your cognitive abilities are declining. So there's a downward slope in all the figures. But just as you approach the cutoff of January 1972, there's a positive upward jump, and then the decline starts again.
Because these are the kids who spend these extra 6 months basically in school.
Extra 6 months. So on the left of the red line are those who spend an additional 6 months. So there is an upward shift in the line. The slope essentially remains the same, but there's an upward
level
shift.
shift. Yeah.
So there's a level effect in the amount of cognitive skills. And that holds across the 3 measures. They're showing it in a regression form here. Whether or not we include any other X variables, the results are fairly stable, that the policy shift increased cognitive abilities between 0.11 to 0.14 standard.
And this did not matter which grade I was enrolled in when I was exposed. So you could imagine, like you were saying, that if you think about, we take so depending on 2 features, right? Like how much is like, if you take Kuna and all very seriously in terms of what life cycle you are in, 1, and 2, I don't know about Indonesia, I guess it's not so bad as the Indian system that once you fall behind, that it's very hard to catch up. That in that sense, you might imagine that people who are quite young and stayed 6 months more have much more to gain from people who are already in the 6th grade and stay 6 months more.
So yes, so this is including everyone who's between grade 1 and grade 6.
Exactly.
We do some more analysis comparing those who are in secondary school and higher secondary school, or and their so in a sense, you're right that these effects are concentrated amongst the youngest
between grades 1 and 6.
So there don't appear to be any effects beyond grade 6. So it's quite possible that the timing matters. So if you were very young, there was an effect. If you were grade 8, 9 onwards, because you were also affected, it doesn't seem to matter.
And within this grade 1 and 6, you can't look at heterogeneity in some sense, or too small the cell sizes are.
Yeah. So between 1 and 6, we really can't.
Okay.
Just
Yes.
a basic question to make sure I'm still on track. The mechanism that we're saying here is that because these children are now half a year older, they are more mature or just better capable of retaining the information that they learn, and they're performing better in these results because of that.
Yes, that's our hypothesis, and I'll show you some more results that make us confident that that's the likely channel.
Right.
So as of now, I'm just showing you that the policy change is linked to an increase in cognitive ability. Right. So that's the first result. Next one is to show you that there's nothing else going on at the same time. So one of the other big change that happened relating to education, that there was an increase in the number of primary schools that were built across Indonesia. There's a very famous paper by Esther Duflo on this. So there was an oil boom. the Indonesian government used revenues from that oil boom to build primary schools all over the country. Between 1978 and 1979, there was a 13% increase in the stock of primary schools. So could that be related to anything that we're seeing here? So we combine information from the Duflo paper into our data set, and we look if high school building intensity areas had anything to do with it, and we don't find that to be the case. We also look at those individuals who never went to school and look if those who were born before 1972 and those who were born after 1972, if there's any differences between them, so as to suggest that there was some other health policies or anything else that could be driving these results, and we don't find that to be the case. Right, so we've shown you that the policy change is linked to these effects. There's nothing else going on in Indonesia that could be explaining these effects. Some associated results. So in IFLS 4 that was done previously, there were two measures of cognitive abilities measured for the same individuals. So we can combine IFLS 4 and IFLS 5 to see if the policy change is also linked to the rate of decline. So between IFLS 4, IFLS 5, you're getting older, there's a decline. Is the rate of decline also affected by the policy change? So that does not seem to be the case. So it looks to be that the policy is increasing the stock of cognitive abilities, but not the decline. There is some evidence that your other socio-economic conditions could be interacting with the policy change as well. So, so if you were of poor health during childhood, or if you experienced hunger during childhood, then the effects of this policy are weaker.
Can I just ask, like, what was how was the indicator poor childhood health determined? Like, was it based on when they were ill, malnourished, or?
So this is reported by the respondents that asked, did you have poor health during childhood? They were also asked, did you experience hunger between the age of 0 to 5, between the age of 6 and 10? These are 0-1 indicators, but these are some. Yes.
Sorry, I just want to clarify, what is the ACS again?
So that's the policy shift. That's the academic calendar shift. So so that's
Okay.
just those who were affected by the shift in the academic.
And the interaction states that those with childhood hunger would not benefit as much from
Yes, yes. So the net effect on them would be the sum of these two. Okay, so if you had some other early life disadvantages to start with, then this policy change would not have that great of an. All right, so with that in mind, then I can spend the rest of the time just going through the mechanisms that we have in mind. All right, so we've shown that the policy shift increases cognitive abilities. We've shown, or we've argued that there's nothing else going on in Indonesia at the same time that could be driving these effects. And now just spend some time over there.
And just as a curiosity, maybe type one, but like what proportion of people are there who report like these kind of things, like that they face hunger or
So childhood hunger was actually quite low.
13%, and about poor health about 50%. No, that's standard deviation.
No, that's standard deviation. So poor health,
About 40% of them say
yes,
so.
38%. Childhood hunger under 5 is actually just 2%.
Okay. Super.
All right. So the the main mechanism that we propose is an increase in your absolute maturity. So for those who were still in school in 1978, so you had to stay back in school for an additional 6 months. So that's increasing your absolute age for grade. So so once you start school in 1978, you are between the age of 6 and 7. So assuming that everyone is uniformly distributed across the 12 months, the average age would be 6.5. You have to wait an additional 6 months, which means that the average age of the cohort becomes 7 years old. Those who start school later, even though they're starting in July, the average age of the cohort is 6.5. So there's this half a year average age difference, which continues as long as you are in school. So this persists throughout your schooling life. So how we disentangle relative and absolute maturity to get at this is that we switch to a difference in difference strategy. So we look at every academic year. We look at the cutoff for admission into every academic year, whether it's January or it's July. So there would be some who are just eligible to take admission. So for if the cutoff is January, so those who are born in December can take admission. Those who are born in January have to wait an additional 12 months. So for every cutoff, we look at 6 months before and after that. So those who have just taken admission would be relatively younger compared to anyone else in their cohort. Those who have just missed out are relatively older relative to anyone else in their cohort. So with that, we make an indicator of being relatively younger. And then we stack this data up and put in an indicator for those who were treated to the calendar shift. So that's the treatment indicator, right? So we can do a difference strategy to see what's the effect of being relatively younger, and then what's the additional effect of getting 6 months more maturity. And what we find is that if you're relatively younger compared to everyone else in your cohort, there's a negative effect on your cognitive abilities. But for those who get these additional 6 months, there's a net positive. Right? So you're able to separate out the relative age effects from the absolute age effects, that in a sense that it's the absolute age maturity that is driving these positive effects. So that bit we thought was quite neat because the other papers in the literature have not been able to do.
So the younger treated here are those got those additional 6 months.
No, that's the treated indicator.
Treated, oh, sorry.
Younger is those who are relatively younger compared to others in their own.
And this is based on your month of birth. Right?
Based on your month of birth.
Exactly.
So if the cutoff is January, those who were in December are relatively younger compared to everyone else in their cohort because they've just taken admission. And those who are born in January are having to wait a full year. So by the time they go to school, they're relatively older to everyone else in their class. So they're the older.
So the people who are relatively younger and also get treated also benefit less, basically, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm having trouble with conception because the younger treated, the coefficient is still positive. So that means
So right. So relative to the relative to those who are young but don't get treated, the ones who get treated end up with yes.
So yeah, dampens the absolute increase in your age had a dampening effect on your being relatively younger in the class, basically.
It overrides that.
It overrides that, exactly, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that absolute maturity that you get overrides the negative effects of being relatively
Yeah. But still, you gain less than a person who was in your class older.
older.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. We can also rule out some alternative mechanisms up to a point. So one being that teachers were told to repeat the material for an additional 6 months. So what we can, so we can check for this in a variety of ways. So firstly, we look at those who had to wait an additional 6 months to take admission. So those who were born between Jan of 1972 and June of 1972 had to wait an 18 months to take admission rather than 12 months to take admission. So they had to wait an additional 6 months. So they also experienced an increase in their age for grade. But they did not experience the repetition of the curriculum because they were not in school. So we compare those who were born in Jan to June of 1972 to those who were born in Jan to June of 1971. So those who were born in Jan to June of 1971 are in school. They get an increase in age for grade, and they also get the curriculum repeated to them. So we don't find, so just doing a comparison of the means, we don't find any significant differences between them. We can also check if attending kindergarten matters. So teachers were repeating existing material. So if you had been to kindergarten earlier, maybe you were already slightly better prepared for formal schooling. So teachers repeating the same material would relatively have a smaller effect on you than for those who had never been in formal schooling before. So we can check for heterogeneity based on whether you had been to kindergarten or not before you entered grade 1. We don't find that to matter. The other way we can go about this is that the INPRESS program was building a lot of schools, and all these schools were by and large getting new teachers assigned to them, and new teachers would mechanically have lesser experience. It could be if curriculum repetition matters, even from the point of view of the teacher having 6 more months to teach the same material would then be able to teach it better if the teacher is a more inexperienced teacher. So in a sense, we should see some heterogeneity based on the school building activity, the this school program, and we don't see that at
Sorry, I'm sure you may have mentioned it, but how do you identify whether an adult was part of an INPRESS school or like a new schooling system?
So we don't identify that. We have information from the Duflo paper on areas that experienced a relatively higher school building activity relative to other parts of the country.
Right.
So this is at the level of the district.
Right.
This is at the level
So
of the
district is considered part of INPRESS as long as it aligns with that
So there was school building activity going on throughout the country. It's just the school building activity was more in areas that had lower enrollment to begin with. So areas that had lower enrollment in primary school got more school building activity. So we use the data from Duflo's paper, merge it in here, and the indicator is at the level of the district.
And I don't know if you're going to show it, but I would think that one natural mechanism to like natural test for your mechanism would be to look at gender differences, no? So if you
There's
look,
no,
it's surprising, no? So I don't know if you know like the work of people like Richard Reeves, you know, the guy at Brookings who has been making a lot of noise about like, you know, this is in the context of the United States, of course, about why boys are falling back. And you know, one of the things he's pushed for in his book, and I mean, he became quite popular, no, like about why boys should start school later,
yes,
right?
yes.
So in that sense, I meant like you might imagine that the fact that these boys are able to stay back longer has
So
much marginal effect. You might imagine is like stronger on the boys than the girls, and that would kind of really nicely fit in with this kind of policy debate happening now, no? But
Somehow, can check again, but as far as I remember, there were no gender differences. But yes, you're right that girls tend to mature a lot sooner. So at the margin, this should matter more for boys. I suspect that I think what I recall, the results were there in some specifications, but they're probably not stable.
okay.
Right. So the last thing we can do is look at the timing of the policy change matters. So there is some evidence that that grade repetition can have positive effects at a younger age, but at later ages it tends to matter less or may also have negative effects. So we check if timing matters. So the way we go about it is that we look at dropout rates between grade 6 and grade 7. So when kids are transitioning from primary school to secondary schooling in Indonesia, at that time there was a sharp decline in enrollment. So so we can use the fact that if you were age 12 and above, you should have been in school, and use that as an IV for whether or not you were enrolled in school in secondary school at the time of the policy change. So essentially doing the same analysis, but now shifted to the threshold between grade 6 and grade 7 rather than the threshold between being out of school and in grade 1. So now the cutoff moves to January of 1966 rather than January of 1972. So panel A shows the results for that, and we don't find any effects of the calendar shift on those who were enrolled in grade 6 at the time of the policy change. We can do the same analysis again for the jump between secondary and higher secondary at grade 9, and once again we don't find any. So this seems to suggest that if you view the policy change as a compulsory grade repetition, that the effects were concentrated amongst those who were younger between the grades of 6.
So in light of this, you might say something like what the Indian government decided to implement, that we should hold no child back in the early grades especially, is like the worst thought out policy in some sense. If you're thinking about long-term cognitive performance, which is what we should be kind of thinking about, would that be that if anything, repetition should be, is there any case to be made for why repetition might be harmful?
Well, I mean, repetition can be harmful. I mean, what's been identified in the literature is that it could have negative psychological effects as well. So the child being held back a grade is made to feel that you're not as good enough as your cohort that's progressed. You lose your friends who have moved on. You are in a newer environment. You have to make friends all over. Again, you may be socially excluded from that group because you're sort of older in the class. These are some of the effects that have been identified. Depending on the context, they may be stronger or not as strong.
Okay, and this is evidence from like
Various countries.
Various countries.
Various countries. So the both pros and cons to grade repetition. But by and large, the consensus seems to be that if grade repetition is to happen at a younger grade, then maybe on the net you could observe some positive effects. But at older grades, that don't seem to find much.
Okay. And just one more thing before I stop then. If you think about, so like given the data set you have, you could also think you could look at correlations between these kind of cognitive performances and life outcomes, or they're too early to do so that you want.
I could show you that on the next slide. So how do we think that the policy change led to an increase in cognitive abilities in middle age? So what we find is that those who experience the policy change stayed in school longer, so you're more likely to graduate from senior high school. We can also look at the types of work that you're doing as an adult. So we find that you're less likely to be doing blue collar work. So you're more likely to be doing white collar work, which is requiring you to be using your cognitive abilities in daily tasks, and which then possibly helps you to maintain that stock of cognitive abilities. Remember that those who experience the policy change are older than those in the control group. So the older cohort is less likely to be doing blue collar work relative to the younger cohort. So even if you think that over time there is more white collar work available for younger cohorts, we still find that those who experience a policy change are less likely to be. Right. So to conclude, we find that the academic calendar shift is associated with or leads to better long-term cognitive abilities. The effects are consistent and hold across a range of robustness checks that we didn't get into here. The effects are somewhat weaker for those with poorer childhood environment, but still positive on the net. The pathways that we think that cause these effects is that it increases your absolute age of grade. You end up with more years of education. You're more likely to do white collar work during your working ages, and that leads to better cognitive outcomes. Right, so I can stop there, take questions or anything else.
Yes. Probably from a perspective of like a naive policy thinker, then would the outcome be like we say that children maybe need to delay the entrance into school or spend more time in schooling? Or how would you sort of like communicate these findings to like a naive policy thinker?
So in the context of Indonesia in the 1970s, we don't want to strongly push the fact that you should delay entry into primary school, because the alternative would be that you are spending time at home, because the spread of kindergartens was not that much. So you would be spending time at home. Depend on the social environment at home relative to going to school in a more structured way. So it's a bit hard to automatically push for going to school a bit later when people were already starting schooling at age 6. Yes, if you were to say that kids are going to school at age 5, that's a different matter altogether.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just have a small question. So I'm just wondering, why do you pick the fifth wave instead of like the earlier wave? Because I'm just wondering, it could be if we look into the earlier wave, maybe there's a potential like narrow down to the possibility that they actually gain more. But in terms of looking into the fifth wave, one thing that I can guess of is that maybe the decline slower. So is there any reason that you pick the fifth wave and not looking into the earlier wave of the survey?
So all these measures are only available in the fifth wave. There were just 2 measures captured in the fourth wave. So we do see the change between the fourth wave and the fifth wave, but only for those 2 measures that were captured there. But yes, when the next round of data are available, one could use that as well, because I think that they'll be capturing all of that. I suppose it should be out anytime soon. Yes.
Do we by any chance know whether for the 6 months the students were still in school? Because I'm just thinking maybe, poorer households could have told their kids, you've already learned what you've learned. Maybe, the opportunity cost of you attending school is higher than you maybe staying at home or helping me with my work as a parent.
The only information we have is the time that you drop out of school, and there does not seem to be a spike in kids dropping out of school in 1979. We don't have school attendance records to check how often the kids came to school, but we do know that the kids had to pay the school fee as they would do in a regular academic year. So it wasn't as if anything was free for them. So they had to pay the fee for 6 months, they had to attend school. If the attendance rates changed, that bit we don't.
But because I guess that goes back to kind of thinking about I guess it's hard to always to push for like a policy what you would like to do, but still I would like to kind of try and kind of unpack this, given we have 5-10 minutes still left, but that at some level you could think about what Kavindra was saying in 2 ways, right? That I didn't drop out of school, but like he said, I just went much more to the field the next 6 months just to work out and work my family out, and then I restarted school after the 6 months, or dropped my attendance pretty sharply. But still I benefited because, all that matters is my brain maturity allowed me that. This is kind of like a longer time span, or is it something to do with being in that social environment of a school longer, which is essential because they have both very different kind of, one is just about delay there because brains just need more time, or not only do they need more time, but they also need some kind of enriching environment, because the schools, like you said, might not be teaching anything new, but still, there's structure to the day. You learn how to socially interact, maybe learn discipline, and all these things kind of then help you build these elements of non-cognitive skills that allow you to kind of enable to gain these cognitive skills, which are more durable in the long run, no?
So that's difficult to separate out for any paper in the field that is looking at either grade repetition or the age at which you enter primary school. The best we could do is here was look at just difference in means among those who left school in 1978 and left school in 1979. So this is going back to your point. So maybe the parents told the kids that, look, there's no point in being in school for these additional 6 months. Let's withdraw you. So there are kids who left school in 1979. And we can compare them to kids who left school in 1978 before the policy change. So firstly, there's no sudden spike in kids leaving school in 1979, but also there's not much in terms of difference in their
Outcomes.
in their outcomes. The other thing that we could do is look at kids who were waiting to join school in 1979. So they're waiting to join school in grade 1, and they've had to wait an additional 6 months. These are the Jan to June cohort of born in 1972. So they've had to wait an additional 6 months to join school. So they see an increase in their age for grade, but they have not joined school. So there's no formal structure that they're exposed to. They're not exposed to grade curriculum repetition as well. We can compare them to those born between Jan and June of 1971. So these are kids who are already in school. So they're experiencing both an increase in their absolute age and also the exposure to the schooling system, which includes your daily structure, but also includes the curriculum repetition that you were experiencing. And then once again, there's difference in them. So that's the best that we can do.
Yeah.
To argue that it's probably the age for grade that's driving it, not age for grade plus
What's happening inside the classroom. And okay, and kind of university, when you look across the globe, sort of, are there countries which differ a bit across, like when you look at when people start, like now that I think about it, I kind of always assume kind of it's like 6 years of age whenever I run some study, but are there any kind of sharp differences across the globe?
It's sharply debated in various parts of the world. At times, you'll see that countries change this over time based on where the debate is going. So, in some parts of Europe, you start at the age of 7. So, you start like a little later. In some countries, they allow you to start a bit sooner at 5. So, normally it flips between 5 and 7, but even within the same country over time that you may see that there's been a change as well, depending on what evidence they see and how strongly they consider it. But it's not a settled issue that you should start only in grade 6 and we should have this cutoff of August or September in terms of enrollment.
I could almost imagine then would be best that you just get kids in school, where they just hang out in school without having to do much, and you only start teaching them a year later or so.
Yeah, I mean, so that's possibly the case for going to kindergarten or nursery before you transition to grade 1. So you end up in a bit of a formal structure.
Yeah.
Where you're still doing a lot of play activities and not exposed to a formal curriculum that helps put some structure before you transition into school.
Sorry, what was their school times like?
The times?
Yeah,
Um,
that 6 months, like from morning to evening.
yeah, so you had your normal day in school. So it's
And
just, so you had, so everything was as normal. It's just that there was no new material to teach. So teachers were told to repeat what they had taught. And apart from that, everything was normal, including the fact that you had to pay your school fees.
And do you think there was any school level effects? Like some schools might be better than others from different regions or different type of schools, and could that have an effect on the outcome?
It's possible. It's possible. We don't see any differences between areas that experience this new school building activity versus areas that experience less of the school building activity. So in a sense, we're comparing schools that are relatively new or areas that got more of these new schools to areas that got fewer of these new schools, because we don't know where exactly the respondents were enrolled. So we don't have information on the school that you were enrolled in. So at least in that, we don't see any differences. But it's possible that with more information on where exactly you were enrolled, was it a private school, public school, with more detailed information?
And you didn't have that info in the.
No, we don't. That's not.
Maybe I can just take this chance, although we are almost out of time. In the online audience, did anybody have a question? No. That's super. Any more questions on the floor?
Is there any way to track whether the adults went on to complete like tertiary education, like university and so on?
Could check university. So what we have here is up to high school. We could check how many went to university. It may not be that
Significantly different from, because I might think that if their cognitive scores were good, then the likelihood would be that they may go on to pursue university education. Maybe that could have also.
Yes, it's quite possible. It's just that in the sample as a whole, I think the proportion doing university is fairly low.
Of that in that time.
Yes. In the
Sorry, one last question, right? So those who are relatively younger, meaning that they were impacted by the policy, correct?
they were not.
They were not.
They were, yeah.
Okay. So could those who have been in, let's say, primary school, two groups of people who were impacted by the policy, but one of them had longer kindergarten experience because of, let's say, an additional 6 months in kindergarten, right, before they start their schooling, June 79, yeah. So do you think those people could have performed substantially better than those who didn't have kindergarten?
Yeah, but we don't see anything on, so we have information on whether you went to kindergarten or not.
Okay.
And we don't see, any differences based on whether you went to kindergarten. But that's a good point. Yeah, we thought there might be something, but we didn't see it. Right. But again, it just could be the fact that kindergarten was not very common, and there's obviously endogeneity also associated with whether or not your parents sent you to kindergarten.
Okay, I think now we are out of time, but we have coffee and some snacks outside, and we can carry on the conversation outside. Okay. So thanks so much again.
Thank you for having me here, and thanks for the comments as well. Thank you.